to the Fritty Knitting Podcast. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is our 8th episode. So today we have Canada represented in the Knitters of the World segment, and we also have a great feature interview with a designer of knitted children's toys. And these toys are totally charming, so you're going to really enjoy that. So hang in there before you watch that, because in the meantime, you're going to see the progress of Andrew's socks and my knitting. So we have to get through that first.
Yep. And the first episode, the first segment that we're having today is Bring and Brag. In Australia, and I think in a lot of parts of the world, there is a routine or a tradition at schools to...
in primary schools.
In primary schools, to let the kids show something that they've got or done or something like that. And normally it's called show and tell.
On Monday mornings after the weekend.
I can't remember.
Yes, always Monday mornings, half an hour.
I suppose.
You could get up and show what you've made or done, or someone's given you as a present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, in Australia sometimes it's called Bring and Brag because you show off whatever you've scored.
Yes.
You know, if you've had a birthday, then that's really cool. You bring in your exciting toys and everyone else is jealous.
So that's the name of the segment for our finished objects.
That's right. But just one more thing. The other thing, because my mum was a primary school teacher, and I know the other aspect to this tradition was that it was the chance for the teachers to find out what was going on at home for the kids.
The home life of the kids.
Yeah, it was a bit of a gossip, mechanism. So, yeah. Anyway, sometimes this segment is very brief, but today I think
sometimes it doesn't. It gets pushed aside.
Yeah.
Doesn't
but I think,
feature.
Andrea, you've actually got something to show us today.
I do. So, finished object. You will all recognise this design, I'm sure, if you have not actually knitted it. And it's the Babel hat by Donna Smith. And it was the official pattern for the 215 Shetland
2015. I was thinking was it the 215th ever
anniversary?
Anyway, say what it is. It's the
2015 Shetland Wool Week official pattern. And it was so popular, there's way over 4,000 projects on Ravelry from it. And it is a totally gorgeous design. So I have knitted it up and made a tutorial on it for you. But before I go into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Donna Smith if you don't already know her. Follow her on Instagram. She puts out the most gorgeous pictures of Shetland where she lives. And it's a lot of these pictures are sort of almost taken from her kitchen window. So she just lives, I think, in a crofting house in the most beautiful scenery. It's totally enviable. But she's a marine biologist, and I think she spent some time away from Shetland and then came back to live there. But she comes from a traditional Shetland crofting family where her aunts or great aunts and grandparents would knit and sell the garments. So really knitting is in her DNA. And she is also very interested in keeping alive the Shetland knitting techniques, because a lot of them haven't been written down, and the patterns and things, they're just they're memorised and then just shown, and then that's how it's been taught to new generations. So I think she's actively trying to make records of things, which is lovely. So that's Donna Smith. And I actually used some modifications by Susan B. Anderson, who I'm sure you all know as well. And if you don't, of course, we've got the links in the show notes. But Susan B. Anderson is a very popular knitting personality. She has her own blog and her own podcast, and she does a lot of helpful advice for knitters on her blog. So she's definitely somebody to follow. And her instructions for things are always so clear and articulate and very easy to follow. Some knitters were having problems with their hats ending up larger than what they wanted, and so she made some modifications to that so to try to counteract that problem. And I think what it was is that knitters were probably not doing a gauge swatch before they knitted this.
Naughty knitters.
Naughty knitters.
Naughty knitters.
And
did I do a gauge swatch for these socks, Tals?
No, you didn't.
Shh. Does anyone do gauge swatches for socks?
Possibly, if they're going to put in a pattern and they're changing their normal amount of stitch counts or whatever, probably they would, yeah. Certainly a sock designer would, who is putting in something complicated. I think the problem may have been that people weren't making gauges for the swatch.
That's right.
Swatches to check their gauge for this hat. And because it's very interesting how you hold your needles will affect your gauge. So I think it's fair to say in general that the German knitting style, where you've got the wool in the left hand, you could also call it European style, it tends to create a looser gauge than the English style. And I think, flickers, which is another form of English knitting, can tend to have quite tight gauges. And what I find interesting is that Alice Starmore has a tighter gauge than most people's, and she's also in the same kind of Shetland knitting tradition. And I assume she's a flicker, and I also assume that Donna might be a flicker. So when a designer writes up a pattern, they write the gauge that they are using. So if you're knitting something and it says you're going to be using 3.25 millimetres and you find that you have to use 2 millimetres, that's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Or, if you've got a big difference in the needle size, what's really important is the fabric that you're creating. Anyway, Susan has counteracted that by cutting out a half a pattern repeat. So that means that you're working with less stitches. So I followed her modifications so that just to make it easy for more and more people to just get in and knit this if they want to. In my tutorial, I am showing you how to do the two-handed ferrule technique and how to weave in the floats from the right hand, how to weave in the floats from the left hand as you go along, because the way I do it, you don't ever have a float that's longer than about 2 stitches. Makes it pretty quick, I think. And also when you're introducing a new colour, how to weave it in and to weave out the old colour that you finished using. So in the end, you have no ends to weave in.
Show us, dolls.
You finish in a minute. You finish your garment and all you have to do is get your scissors out and chop off things. So it's great. But before I show you, I will show you, and I'm going to show you in the... That's the inside. But I'm also going to show you in this tutorial, which I'll bring out in a couple of weeks. But it wants me to quickly mention, if you haven't already seen our previous episode, episode 7, and you're interested in ferrule, go back and watch it. We've got a great interview with the Philosopher's Wool, the founders of the Philosopher's Wool Company. That's Anne and Eugene Bourgeois, who are now in their 80s, and they are a wonderful couple who have been very generous in their community in many, many ways by helping to create very good pay for the farmers of producing fleece, of supporting a whole lot of local knitters, helping with their environment. So if you would like, and this is where I learnt the two-handed ferrule technique from, so I have to give full credit to these two. So if you would like to do it, I would really suggest that you go out and buy their DVD. I know a DVD is not the most modern technology, but I think they're totally people to be supported, and I'm very thankful for all of the work that they've done for knitting and certainly for this ferrule technique. And they not only show you how to do the weaving of everything, but they also show you other techniques, like how to insert a pocket in a garment, so how to knit one up and knit it in, or how to finish off with the seaming and things. So it's a great instructional DVD. I will bring out my tutorial in a couple of weeks, so you can look at that as well.
Wow.
I'm trying to rush in all this information.
Yeah, I'm still taking it in.
Taking in your coffee.
I'm taking my coffee too.
So finally, I just want to say the wool that I used was a Rowan hemp tweed. And that is 75% wool and 25% hemp. And I didn't know much about hemp. I used to think that hemp was a very modern fibre. So I Googled it very quickly, and I found out that actually Christopher Columbus sailed to America with hemp sails.
Yeah.
And they found hemp in old Egyptian tombs. So The interesting thing is that it's a very strong fibre, but it wasn't usable for household or textile clothing wear until the 80s, because they couldn't find a way of taking some ligament or fibre or something out of
Making it a bit less tough.
Making it a bit less tough, or
It's
softer.
fine to have a tough sailcloth, but not so much having a tough shirt.
Exactly. And then they found an enzyme which would break that down without destroying the structure of hemp. And so hemp is actually very good. It's very good for the environment. In the same amount of land, it produces 250% the produce as cotton does. It's also really good because it doesn't stretch. Cotton does tend to stretch. This combination with the wool, it doesn't stretch, and it just gets softer and softer with use over time. So it's a great wool. And this is such a great design because you can have so much fun picking colours, and there's some great colours. People have gone really avant-garde by making pink sheep and different kinds of sunsets in the background. So I've done a rather conservative one. But yeah, so Bring and Brag is over. We're up to under construction.
Yep. Speaking of which,
you can go first.
do you want to just have a look at that? All right. Well, this is a good point to come in. I did get some knitting done, but now I have to stop. I'm doing these socks, and I've been doing these socks for a few episodes, let's say, which means a few months.
No, not a few months.
Not a few months. And they're going really well, and they're beautiful. And this time, this is my second pair of socks. Last time I did it all pretty much just, the normal stitch.
Okay, so
stocking stitch. Normally I just did stocking stitch, yeah?
Yes.
But this time I thought, and again we're using a pattern by Susan B. Anderson, essentially here, her simple sock pattern I think it's called. She has it where you do, I'm not good at all these names, but...
the slip stitch on the heel flap.
The heel flap, yep, doing the heel flap. And it's not hard, right? You do, on the one side you just purl back, on the other side you slip as if to purl, and then you knit one, then you slip as if to purl and you knit one. That's easy, but I'm just doing something wrong at the ends, and you can put down your knitting tiles. And I must be doing a yarn over somehow, and I just don't know what's wrong. But
I always say the first thing to do is to count your stitches. Then you know.
I'm sure the stitches are good.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22, 4, 6, 8, 30, 32, and you've got 33. So you know you have got a yarn over. So that's the first thing you do.
All right, well,
just check.
News to me.
Okay.
Yep, anyway, that's been my adventure, and it's just, I don't know.
It's looking good.
It reminds me...
He is a beautiful knitter. And I do want to say a couple
You're
of...
a beautiful knitter too, darling.
We're beautiful knitters together.
Yeah.
I want to say a few things in his defence, because...
Do I need defending here?
Yes, I think you do.
Right.
Because he sits down on the couch at 10 o'clock at night after a really long, stressful day at work and does a couple of rows at the most, so you're doing brilliantly for that.
Yeah.
You don't have time to sit down for an hour and knit.
No.
So the fact that you just keep coming back and doing two means that you're actually learning a little bit slower or practicing slower. So it's still...
Yeah.
He has said to me a couple of times he'd prefer to be down in the cellar bucketing out water.
We did think, right, as far as
doing this slip stitch.
As far as entertaining international television, which is what we do here, sometimes it would have been really quite good if we just put the camera on of an evening and seen how frustrated I was with this tiny change to what I've been doing for a long time already. And yeah, again, going back to previous episodes, we had a bit of a water incident in our house, and I spent a lot of time downstairs in the cellar bucketing out water. Out.
And he was considering...
Sometimes I was thinking prefer to be back doing that than figuring out what's happening with these yarn overs.
So that's Andrew's socks. They're a beautiful colour. For those of you who haven't watched any more, this is your first episode. Thank you for joining us, by the way. This is the Rowan Fine Art. It's a beautiful, beautiful merino wool, silk blend, hand-painted. They're going to discontinue it. It's terribly sad. I love it. It is so soft. It is so beautiful. Anyway, now we're on to me. I'm doing my Lovage, and you can have a scratch or do whatever you want to do. Curse silently, because I'm going to cover you with a picture of the lovage.
Okay.
So the lovage I've shown you for the last 3 episodes, I think, and I am almost going to finish it on this podcast today. So as you can see, let me hold it around. This is the front. I'm just doing the neckband, which I've got one more row to do, and then I have to cast off and that's finished. So I'm very happy. It's knitted for my daughter, who totally loves it. What can I say? It's been really fun doing these bands of different pattern constructions. I love this one here. I think that would have to be my favourite one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That's like noughts and crosses.
Oh, I think it looks like flowers.
Okay, it's flowers. Yep.
But not because of the colours, but because of the design. They all fit together very prettily. I like this as well with the little leaves. And I think my favourite colours are the green and the blue together. And
the green and the blue's good.
And the green and the pink.
Green and the pink's good too. I think it's all good. I think it's going to be lovely and it will look beautiful on our daughter.
It will look beautiful on our daughter.
I imagine there'll be a bit of negotiating going on to see who actually gets to wear it at what time.
No, it's totally hers.
Wow.
She loves it so much. She gets, if I even pick up any other knitting, she says, "What about my jumper?"
Yep. There
is an added panel that of a crochet panel in the pattern that's done in this colour here, which is just a slightly darker version of the main body colour. And I have to say, I want to do it. I cannot crochet. I'm going to learn to crochet because I've never been inspired to crochet before until I came across Marie Wallin's designs. And she incorporates crochet in a lot of her designs as just a beautiful element, and it just makes the garment just exquisitely beautiful, I think. So there's a panel of lace that is going to be knitted separate or crocheted separately, and then from the cuff up to here. And Madeline wants it, and so
that just goes on top of the material.
That just goes on the top, and you sew it in.
Yeah.
So I have to learn to crochet.
I missed that on our statistics.
But you can't crochet either.
No. Can you crochet, Andrea? No. Can you crochet, Andrew? No. Which means we're equal.
We're equal. Equal in our skills.
Yeah.
This is Andrew's statistics.
It's only a subtle difference between the skills of Andrea and me. Okay.
I am going to go to Very Pink. I think she does some crochet classes, so I'm going to check her out. So we now have the Knitters of the World segment, and today's episode is going to represent Canada.
Hi, my name is Valérie. My blog is knitbug.com, and I go by knitbugval on Ravelry and Instagram. So I live in a smallish southwestern Ontario town in Canada. It's about an hour and a half from Toronto, where I spend my days as an archivist for a television and radio broadcaster. I'm French Canadian, although my accent might have already given that away. And I learned to knit at the age of 7 or 8 by my paternal French grandmother, and she taught me how to cast on and how to do the knit stitch. And I have these wonderful memories of this faux leather ottoman that she kept all of her knitting supplies in, and it was just like this treasure chest that I could only access after dinner time once everything was put away, and only if I was really good. But I didn't learn to cast off anything or to do anything other than the knit stitch until my early 20s, when I fell upon the book Weekend Knitting by Melanie Fallick. I think this was around 2003. And I was just amazed at the beautiful photography and the really modern projects, and mystified at these mysterious symbols. And I thought, I need to find out what these mean so that I can read this text and maybe knit one of the projects. And this is actually my second copy of the book because I dog-eared the first one so badly. I carried it with me everywhere and it got pretty damaged. But I learned to knit at 7 or 8. I learned to purl and everything else, read patterns, in my early 20s. I've got 2 projects on the needles right now. One is nearly finished. This is going to be a design for a A-line tee with cap sleeves. It's inside out right now, so it's not much to look at, but you can tell that there's going to be a lace panel framed by some garter stitch. I'm also working on a semi-matching shawl. It's got a similar lace pattern with garter stitch and my absolute favorite, picot edging. I cannot get enough of picot edging on shawls. I think it's so pretty. For any given knitting project, I prefer something really simple and straightforward that I can work on while doing something else, because one of my favorite things to do is to knit while watching a movie, or even more so reading a book. A paper book, I've got this plastic contraption that holds my book open for me and leaves my hands free to work away. And I think that desire for simplicity translates into my few design attempts. I'd say my most used design tool is Knitter's graph paper. I print it out, carry it with me everywhere. I've even scaled it down to fit in my day timer so that I can, try out and draw out different stitch patterns, and then I save them for later, and then they end up becoming, things like this. This is the Triangles cowl. This is one of my first designs, and I was playing with reversible textures. So I apparently kept up with the reversible texture idea and came up with Glen Valley. It was initially, I was just looking for gift knitting ideas that were interesting enough for me to knit and simple enough to suit a variety of recipients. I'm wearing my Battersea tee. This was inspired by traditional Gansey and Aran patterns, specifically the men's styles that have the stitch patterns running horizontally across the chest. Those are my favorite. So I added some short sleeves, a high-low hem, and I've been enjoying it for my second summer now. I ended up making a sweater, a cape, a hybrid sweater cape. So it's basically the same stitch pattern throughout the chest area, but I added a narrow cuff near the bottom hem, and even though it's kind of hard to wear this underneath a coat because of the lack of mobility, I suppose, for the arms, it's terrific for lounging around indoors. I've even worn it to work. After the Battersea tee and the Battersea cape, I wasn't through with the Gansey theme, and I went on to write up the pattern for Old Salt. It's, again, like a mariner themed knit with some traditional and not so traditional stitch patterns. It's got a really wavy edge and the squishy garter ridges to separate the patterns, and they allow for the increases that give it the semi-triangular shape. I can't bear the thought of getting it dirty or badly worn, so it lives folded up on the couch and it just waits for me to get home in the evenings when my husband turns the air conditioning way up. And it's been keeping me company almost every single evening now since I finished it. So I've been really, really pleased. So thanks to Andrea and Andrew for asking me to participate, and thank you for watching.
So, we're back.
We're back.
I've done 5 rows while you've been watching that. Is that true, Andrea?
I've just picked up my knitting, so.
Yeah, I have to write them all down. Just a minute.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie. Valerie is a very sweet knitter. She's done some great little designs there. I really like the poncho with the sleeve cuffs, the dark green one. I think that's really cute. Yep. And also the yoke that has the the spinning wheels around it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought they were very stylish.
Yeah.
Her
Very.
jumpers.
Yeah.
And she had a short-sleeved one, didn't she?
Yeah. The one she was the grey, light grey one. So thanks a lot, Valerie. I'm going to answer a question by a viewer. So a viewer wrote on Ravelry a question, and she wanted to know, well, she mentioned that she thought I was using exclusively Rowan yarns, and why I liked Rowan yarns, or did I feel the need to use any other yarns? So I had to have a little laugh, because I thought to myself, I can understand that you might get that impression.
Yeah. And I've noticed that too.
What?
That we often say we're using Rowan yarns.
Yes, totally.
This is Rowan yarn and that's Rowan yarn.
Absolutely, yeah. So I use a lot of Rowan yarns, that's absolutely true, but not exclusively. And I think I should start by saying that Rowan Yarns do not sponsor this podcast.
Yeah.
They do not send us free yarn gifts for ourselves or to give to our viewers.
Or cash.
Or cash.
Any of those things.
And I'm not a Rowan ambassador. So this is, anything that I say about Rowan Yarns is purely from the heart, I suppose, you could say. It's
just a choice.
It's just a choice. So, but I do have to say, in the last 2 to 3 years, I have knitted 7 Alice Starmore jumpers, all with her yarn, which is the Hebridean 2-ply or 3-ply. Yeah, so this is an interesting question, because it got me onto thinking a little bit about
Why?
Yeah. So
Why did you what?
the knitting world is wonderful, because it incorporates so many different kinds of knitters, and so many different and knitters come to knitting with so many different types of passions, and so it got me thinking a little bit.
Yeah,
I'll just talk
something's
and
gone wrong there.
fix up Andrew's knitting. What are we
there's-
up to?
I think
Knitting.
something fell off.
No, I have to get back to my train of thought.
Sorry, you're mid-sentence.
Yes, knitters come to knitting with many different passions. For me, I am very much design driven. That is my passion. So let me explain that a little bit more. First of all, I would probably say I have to incorporate what I said in the first episode, was that I don't have a stash. And I think that that's highly unusual amongst knitters. I think if you knit a lot of scarves and shawls and socks and even hats, it's easy to accumulate a stash, because most of the time you're only just buying one skein, because these projects are often just one skein projects. I've knitted 3 pairs of socks in my life and a couple of hats. I've knitted a couple of lace shawls as gifts, but what I really love to do is knit garments. I love to knit cardigans, jumpers, jackets, summer tops. That's my love. That's what I'm passionate about. And I love to spend a lot of time looking at beautiful designs. Then I pick one, and then I go out and buy a yarn that is really appropriate for the design I'm going to knit. And I love to have the freedom to do that and not feel obliged to use something from my stash because I've already spent the money there, which mightn't be exactly perfect. It might be sort of an okay colour, but not really my perfect choice colour, or not really the perfect type of yarn to substitute for the pattern. So I really actually love knitting like that, and having the freedom to go out and get, and because it's so easy to buy yarns, you can get yarns very quickly, where, that's not and I usually spend a lot of time in advance knowing what my next project's going to be, because I plan it. It's important to me, the designs that I knit. So getting back to Rowan has wonderful yarns. There's many other yarns out there that are just as beautiful as Rowan's. But I have to say, Rowan has got a huge selection of yarns, and I've only used a small selection of theirs. So I could happily knit exclusively Rowan yarns for a few more years, and before I feel like I need more different types of combinations. Say, the garment I've just finished was a yak and cotton blend. They've got hemp and wool, all different kinds of natural sheep breeds, all different kinds of chunky wools, thin.
Do they do breed specific wools?
They do. Unfortunately, they're changing now. They're cutting out a lot of their range. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Okay.
But they did. Marie Wallin introduced British breed sheep breeds,
Okay.
and they were all in the natural colours. But they're discontinued now. I would have loved to have tried some of those. So by no means have I exhausted the Rowan wool selection repertoire at all. Other knitters perhaps would knit similar kinds of projects, and they would get a lot of enjoyment out of swapping the yarns and trying different types of yarns from different companies or different dyers. I am really focused on design, and that's where Rowan really suits me, because they support really top designers. And while I speak, I'm going to put some photos again over Andrew. Bye.
Bye.
Of some designs that I think are exquisitely beautiful. Unfortunately, I would like to put a range of pictures here for you to see from different designers that I'm going to mention, but I haven't asked their permission, and I don't want to get in trouble with copyright, but I have asked Marie Wallin, and it's fine. So the designs you're going to see are Marie Wallin's, but Rowan has employed over the years many great designers. To name, there's Kim Hargraves was the head designer, I think, for many years. She now designs on her own. Erica Knight also designed for Rowan. She also now has her own yarn company. Debbie Bliss, the same with Kafa Fawcett. I never know if I'm pronouncing his name properly. Martin Story is another brilliant designer. Lisa Richardson, she's great as well, and Sarah Hatton. So all of these really top designers design for Rowan, and top designers will use top quality yarns anyway. So, and for instance, if I'm Kate Davies has just brought out her own yarn. So if she's going to design something that's based on her yarn, I would buy her yarn to knit her pattern. It's going to be a good yarn, you're guaranteed of that. But she knows the yarn really well. She would have worked with, she knows the properties of the yarn, of how to make it into the kind of fabric that is going to be just right for the design she's making. So I'm happy I don't have a stash. I've got the freedom to go and buy her yarn to fit her design. Same with Erica Knight. She's got a beautiful yarn range of linen, summer colours coming out. So if I was going to make one of her designs, I would use her yarn. So I love the way they support the industry, the whole fashion industry. And their designs that they come out, go and look at their books if you are interested. They have a huge range of designs. Designs that an average knitter can knit, so you're an inexperienced knitter and just say an average experienced knitter, beautiful designs. But then they go to really experienced knitters and off-the-chart knitters, designs for off-the-chart. And if you look at it in a business way, you could think, I am so grateful that they put the money into making these designs that probably a handful of knitters around the world are going to actually knit. But it brings the whole craft of knitting into an art form when you can see what a beautiful design can be made, what a beautiful garment can be made from hand knitting. That to me is so exciting. I love that. That's what I feel very passionate about. That's what I love about Alistair Moore.
Rowan.
Huh?
Rowan?
Alistair Moore as well.
Oh, okay.
I showed you this book in episode 4. I'm not sure. But just the pattern at the front. Now, I quite understand that not many knitters are going to knit this. First of all, it's a bit like a joker's outfit, but it's a stunning design. She does it in a few different colourways, and it's just immaculate. And all of her finishing details are so beautifully done. But I am so grateful that someone has come up with such a gorgeous design, and it's inspiration, and it makes me want to learn the techniques I need to knit this, and that's wonderful. So that's why I love Alistair Moore, and that's why I love Rowan. They really combine And I find myself more and more being attracted to knitting more and more complex stuff because I love it. I will knit simple things that I need, but I just love the look. I suppose it's because I love clothes, and we don't have an income where I can go off to top fashion houses and put on beautiful clothes. And I remember when I was in Paris and I went to some of the top fashion houses and Coco Chanel, and you see the gorgeous garments there, and they are incredibly priced. You know, thousands of euros. I can't believe anyone can actually afford to buy that. You know, anyone average anyway. But you look at the finishing of them and you see the materials and you see how they're done and you can see the beauty in it. And I love that. And to me, these high-end knitted garments are like that. I think can be just as beautiful, just as exquisite, and that's what excites me. And I'm so grateful for people any company or any designer who does that, because it's an art form. It's not for the mass market and they're not going to make a huge amount of money out of it. What are we moving on to?
I don't know.
Carl news. Just a little bit quickly on I'm running a Fair Isle Carl for anyone who's new, and that is a garment. Carl, yes, so no hats or scarves, but a garment or a vest is great. Pop along to the thread and see the other garments. There's some really beautiful designs there. So if you're a first-time Fair Isle, please come and join if you're motivated to. If you're an experienced, amazing Fair Isle knitter, please come and join, because then other people can be inspired by your wonderful work, and you can, inspiration is a brilliant thing. And
show your stuff.
Exactly, and there's some great designs there. So take a photo of what you've done so far, even if it's just cast on, your colourways or what wool you've chosen, what patterns you're doing, and thank you for those people who have already entered and are starting to chat back and forth and inspire each other. You're doing a cowl.
Yep. So my cowl is for first-time garment knitters. So if you haven't knitted a garment before, then this is your chance. I am going to do something. This is why I'm trying to push through these socks, because once I do that and once one other condition is fulfilled, I'll be able to start making what I'm going to do is make a jacket for myself. So knit a jacket with a zip in the front. The rules on my cowl, and I take this very seriously, is that it has to be an adult garment. It has to have sleeves. We made some compromise on the exact length of the sleeves, I think. But we've got about 10 people in there now, 10 or 11. So that's really cool. I have to admit, I haven't had much time to have a look into the threads, but you've been keeping a bit of an eye on.
Yes, and so we thought today we'd just have a quick talk about prizes. We're going to be gathering some prizes together. What I would like to do for my Carl is Alice Darmore yarns, I think, are brilliant for Fair Isle, and she has something where you can buy 25 pounds worth of wool, and it's free delivery everywhere around the world. So that's going to be my gift to the winner of this cowl, of the Fair Isle cowl. So you'll be able to go over and buy 25 pounds worth of your choice of yarns, and it'll be shipped to you for free, because that's the price, that's the deal there. And we were thinking here.
Like that, yeah.
Yes.
So this is going to be the prize for my cowl, which is The Knowledgeable Knitter by Margaret Radcliffe. I haven't read it again because I just.
But
I'm doing other stuff. I'm working in.
So Andrea does so much. It's yeah.
But I have had a look at it, and I did have a quick look at here on the cover. It says The Zipper Controversy.
Yes.
So it's got all sorts of technical stuff. It looks really good. It looks at different stitches and different
very clear
joining techniques and all that stuff. So I think it's if you're doing my cowl and you're doing your first garment, then I think this would be a really, really good book to have. So
yes,
we're going to send that out. We'll pick a winner and we'll send that out.
Yeah, not this copy.
This copy, no, because
we'll send you one from Amazon.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think we're now up to our interview. So this is an interview I've done with the the designer of knitted toys, Lorraine Pistorio. I was really impressed with her because she brings a lot of detail to her knitted toys and just beautifully done. And I think if you knit one of her toys, you're going to learn a lot of knitting techniques.
She's got heaps of detail in there, and I think the animals, I mean, this is not something that I'm majorly into knitting toys, but I must say she does such an awesome job there. Really cool animals. I thought they were super. And,
yes.
yeah.
And she puts a lot of
And the
character into the animals and their faces and the knitting techniques. I think that's her passion. She loves to look at how she can do something, the technique behind it. So even if you're not interested in toys, you could take her pattern and learn a lot from it.
Yep.
So let's say goodbye to you now. Thanks for viewing. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. So happy knitting till then. And again, go and get yourself a drink of your choice.
Yep.
And relax and enjoy the next interview.
Enjoy the interview. And very quickly, we're on Instagram as Fruity Knitting, and there is also a fruityknitting.com, which has got all the show notes and all that sort of stuff, so you can catch us there. And apart from that, we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. Today we're joined by a designer of knitted children's toys, and her cuddly animals are really delightful. I think they've got a really special look about them because the personality of each animal really shines out at you. And knitting toys is not something I've done much of, so I'm actually really looking forward to learning a thing or two with our guest today. So I'm very happy to welcome Lorraine Pistorio, who is joining us today from northern New Jersey. So welcome, Lorraine, and thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
Actually, let's start right at the beginning because I'm always curious about people's knitting histories. So can you tell us a little bit about yours? So when you started to knit, who taught you? And then how did that transition into designing toys, as well as maybe did you have any other crafting experiences, and did those experiences also influence your designing or your process?
Well, I learned to knit when I was a very young child. My mother taught me to knit. She was a very talented seamstress. And by the time I was about 10 years old, I started sewing some clothing of my own. I taught sewing lessons when the children were young, to adults and to children, and I did some custom sewing and some alterations for people. My mother impressed upon me how important it was to produce a professional look and to pay close attention to detail. And this really had an influence on my knitting as well. After I was retired, I had more time to devote to knitting. So I became interested in three-dimensional knitting, where I would try to build shape into my knitting to produce animals. Many people were encouraging me to make them and sell them, but since I really dislike having to knit something over and over again, I decided instead that I would write down my instructions into a pattern format so that others could then make the pattern, knit the animal, and I could go on to design something else.
Okay. So you just mentioned that you're retired now, and I think you said to me before that you were a former director of a preschool. So I imagine you're extremely well educated and experienced in early childhood development and psychology. So has that affected your understanding of toys or how you've developed your designs for toys?
Well, yes, because I have been around little children for a number of years, I had a lot of opportunities to watch them, to see how they would learn and play with their toys, and that definitely influenced the way I design my animals. With my rainbow designs, I try to reflect a childishness, a sweetness about the animals, so that a child will want to gravitate toward them and relate to my animals, and then want to become friends. In the case of my elephant, this is a really a good example. The elephant has chubby cheeks and an oversized head,
Yeah.
and he's sitting in a position like he's just been plopped down on the floor, sitting with his legs spread apart. And these are characteristics of children, because when they plop down on the floor, their legs usually shoot out to the
Yeah.
sides as well.
Yeah.
I also feel that because they are for children, that a strong, solid construction is very important. It would not do if an arm fell off. That would be very
It
sad.
would be tragic.
It would be. So I try to design my patterns with that in mind. For example, in the case of this giraffe, the forelegs and the arms and the body, the neck and the head are all one piece. So if the giraffe is being dragged around by his arm, it won't fall off.
Yeah.
So I have to be very conscious of that when I design them. My toys are for children for different uses. Knowing how children play and learn, I've kept that in mind when I design for specific age groups.
Okay.
If I'm going to design for a baby or a young toddler in mind, I will try to focus on having the design be something for cuddling or comfort. My mini blankie loveys are very popular for that reason. There is a series of 12 animals. I have my hippo here, and you can see that it's got a small little 12-inch blanket, because I know toddlers tend to want to drag their loveys around with them.
Yeah.
And this way they won't trip on them. I've seen many little ones go down because they were carrying around something so long that they stepped over it and tripped. Also, this is easy to transport. It doesn't take up too much room. Mom could place it just about anywhere to take along with them. I know that children love dress-up play, and so this kind of an animal was designed for that purpose, with removable overalls so they could be
Okay.
taken off
Yeah.
and dressed again. Also, I know that children love to have dramatic play, and all of the superheroes are so very um, popular with them.
Yeah.
So when I designed this animal for that purpose, so that they can play superheroes or dramatic play with him. I know that children also love to play house and do family play, and my bunny family, with the 3 different sizes of bunnies, my plain and fancy bunny pattern was done for that reason, was designed. And here would be the middle size one, where the arms are movable and the legs are movable, so they can be positioned in any way. So they could play house and families, and one is big enough for the daddy, and the middle sized one could be the mom, and the little one could be the child.
They are so beautiful. It's amazing to see them in real life. Like, I've seen the pictures, but they really come to life just seeing them now on the video. They're gorgeous.
And on the
Yeah.
pattern, they also have clothing that could be an option, so that the knitter could make them already with clothing on,
Okay.
or plain like this one
Yeah.
that I showed you here. I know preschoolers are also into learning their colors and their shapes, and I always feel that learning should be a fun activity. And that's why I had designed my colors counterpillar, which is a caterpillar
Yeah.
that has a series of 10 different colored rings on a
Uh-huh.
cord, and they could take these rings off, and each of the of the rings will have a number between 1 and 10. And there are also little beads that are sewn to the top of each of the rings that match the amount that the number says. So they can actually touch them and count the beads and put them in number order, either in ascending or descending order, so they can learn their colors and their numbers in a fun way.
That sounds brilliant.
Well, I try to think of different ways to help children with their learning and having fun at the same time.
Yeah.
But some of my designs are meant for other purposes. I have some designs that I use for decoration.
Mm-hmm.
My Christmas elf that would sit on the shelf for the holidays. I have done Rudy the reindeer and holiday mice that are both Christmas and Hanukkah mice. Also, I find that knitters love to give gifts for people. They love to knit things that would be considered a gift. And so my occasions animal gifts would be a good one for this.
Okay.
They might send a gift for someone who they want to wish good luck or congratulate them, celebrate with them. Or sometimes it's just to let them know how much they're loved or to give them a gentle hug if they're not feeling well.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes if they're graduating, I have graduation bears as well that could be knit up in the colors of the school that the person is graduating from.
But I think some of some of your lovely designs are suitable for adults as well.
Right. Well, that's why I mean, some of them are meant to be sent to adults for those reasons.
Yeah. If you're not feeling, I mean, those, I love the bunny family. I think they're just so gorgeous. I love the way the ears are shaped. And I have noticed that you have a lot of detail in all of your animals. They have different shaped ears, and that sort of shows different personalities. And I think that's really clever. I particularly love the bunny. So I could imagine having a beautiful bunny in the colours that suit your living room, you know, to sit on your couch, for instance, is a great gift to give somebody. Yeah.
I know many people have emailed me and have said that they have sent it to their sister-in-laws or their mothers as just for a comfort. Sometimes someone who is in a nursing home loves to have something there just to know that someone has thought about them enough to make something for them. It's a nice thought.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get a little bit technical now, because we've got, we always have some knitting nerds who are viewers, and I'm a knitting nerd as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the techniques that you incorporate in your designs? And has this developed over the course of designing? Have you used certain techniques and then decided through experience that others work better? Or, what's that been like?
Well, early on, my designs were knit flat and seamed because personally, I just disliked working with all those double-pointed needles. And I know that there were a lot of knitters that would email me and say, I don't want to knit in the round because I don't like the double-pointed needles. Could you please design knit flat and seamed? So I had done that in the past, and my Plain and Fancy Bunnies is an example of that. But then once I was introduced to the magic loop method of knitting in the round, it opened up a whole new world to me, and I found that so much easier to use. And a lot of knitters were now discovering magic loop as well, and so now they were emailing me asking me to design in the round. And one of my examples would be my baby ducky. Knitting in the round allows me to not only produce a neater project, but it also allows me to see the shape as it's taking place so that I can tell if I'm on the right track.
Okay.
With my duck pattern, I tried to put in my latest designs, try to place as many things knitted on as you go along. In the case of my duck, you start at the feet, and then add on the body, and then add on the wings, and then add on the head. So and it's being stuffed as you go along. So by the time you get to the top of the duck, he's just about all done, except for adding on the bill or any other little decorations that you might add.
Okay.
So I found that to be easy way to do things. I find that it's easier, it's quicker,
Yeah.
and you don't have all that seaming afterward. One of the main important techniques that I use in creating my animals is to create shape into it. And I could do this in a number of ways. One of the ways I choose to do it in is to use short rows, either shadow wrap short rows or wrap and turn short rows. In my giraffe, I used shadow wraps for his bottom to
Okay.
allow him to sit freely without having to lean up against the wall. Under here, you can see that the shadow wraps were placed all along here. It makes a very nice finish,
Okay.
and it also does the job well.
Is there? Can you give a quick description of how a shadow wrap is different from a normal?
Wrap and turn?
Yeah.
Well, with a wrap and turn, you would go to a certain point, you would bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch, put the yarn back and put the slip stitch back on there, and then turn your work.
Yeah.
It does leave that little
Horizontal bar. Yeah.
yes, and you have to remember to knit that along with it when you come across it, otherwise you will see that bar. On a shadow wrap, you will knit to a point, and then you will do almost like a lifted increase would. You would knit into the right hand side of the stitch below,
Yeah.
and then put that onto the stitch next to its shadow along the left. So it's kind of like a mother-daughter stitch together,
Okay.
and then turn. And you would do the same thing on the purl side. So you would end up with two stitches to be one, treated as one stitch.
Uh-huh.
And it just seems to flow a lot nicer. In the ducky, when I did the shadow wraps along here, I situated them so that it actually turned up his tail. So I created a shape that way to create the tail. Now, when I did the wrap and turn method, I chose to use that on my monkey. I used that for his nose
nostrils.
and for his eyebrows.
Oh, he looks
and
so
also,
gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. And also to make the bend in his knee. I use the
Okay.
wrap and turns on that one. But many times in my patterns, I will tell the knitters that they could substitute one or the other if they're more comfortable with one than the other. Another way that I include shape into my designs is to use yarn on a needle. And this pattern is not out yet. It will be coming out soon. But in this case, if I turn it sideways, you can see that I indented the eye and I made the brow protrude
Yeah.
just by using yarn on a needle, and also doing the shape of the paws was used that way.
Okay. So like sewing it in to pull it in the center
Right.
of the limb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another way, of course, and you can't do any kinds of shaping without putting in the increases and the decreases. And in this case, I try to hide my increases and decreases because I really want it to look not so visible. In my lion, as you can see, you don't see the increases in the front too much, but if I lift his arm up, I will have the increases hidden under the arm.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes I want the increases and the decreases to be a design feature, as I did with his nose,
Yes. Yes.
to accentuate the nose. So although I took in the shape, I was able to then do the increases and decreases alongside the nose. Another way that another technique that I use in my knitting is creating texture. And I find that's an important design feature as well. When I did the unicorn, I wanted the mane to have a lot of texture. And these were created simply by doing cable cast on a number of stitches and then directly binding them off.
Okay.
And that created that kind of texture
Yeah.
for his mane. Another way I use texture would be to create volume in my patterns. For instance, on the top of the sheep, there are little loops. It's black, so I'm not sure if you can see that, but there are little loops of made all along the top of his head just to add some volume to it. Another way would be to use specialty yarns. On my lion, with his mane, I used eyelash yarn.
Okay.
So that technique allows the fullness
Yeah.
Just by changing the yarn.
Yes.
And on my giraffe, sometimes I will use pom-poms to create the spiky mane that giraffes generally would
Yes.
have.
There is so much detail. I am so impressed that have gone into the construction. It's when you
Yes, there is. There is a lot, and until I start looking at it that I realize that, yes, I do have it. I will use eye cords sometimes to create body parts, like I did to create the monkey's fingers and his toes. These are individual eye cords that were made and then all attached together and then going up the foot. And the same thing with the arms going up the hands. Sometimes I will use French knots, as I used French knots to create the nostrils on the unicorn, and also I used French knots, a French knot on the elephant mouth underneath. It's a large French knot, not like the tiny French knot that you would associate with fine embroidery.
So these techniques that you've put in your patterns, haven't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're all in there showing them how to create these. Sometimes I will want to create a flat foot. For instance, on the elephant, if I just stuff the elephant after it's knitted, it will tend to bulge on the end.
Or be rounded,
but because
yes.
and because I wanted to keep them flat, I inserted small plastic rings of a plastic canvas, which is washable, and attached to the bottom of the foot before stuffing. So that helps to keep it flat. When I made the zebra, that consisted of a lot of wide stripes. And when you knit in the round, it tends to cause, when you change the color, it tends to jog the stripes.
Yes.
So they don't completely line up. So I would use a technique of jogless striping, which I explain in the pattern as well, so that when you come around after knitting one round using the new color, you will then do a lifted increase of to grab that bottom one of the old color in with the new color, and that will line them up so that they look neater that way.
I'm just thinking that if a relatively inexperienced knitter were to just take one of your designs, they would be introduced to so many of the basic, or not basic, but so many useful techniques. It would be, whether you've got children to knit this for or not, it's a great miniature project
to carry them over,
to learn techniques that you can put in garments, on all different kinds of knitting projects. It makes me want to knit one.
For sweaters, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's all of these techniques you're talking about are used in one design or the other, and it's great to have a design where you're introduced, a smallish project where you're introduced to quite a lot of them in a detailed way to really get an understanding and feel for it.
Yes, and a lot of people have told me, gee, I never tried that before. That works out well. I think I'm going to use that in something else.
Exactly. So,
now, as far as embroidery goes, I don't use too much of it except for maybe for facial features, or instead of using safety eyes, I might embroider eyes or a nose on. But in this case, I chose to just suggest giraffe markings because they are so asymmetrical. It's really difficult to get giraffe markings knitted in, and this kind of is an easy way to just suggest it, where they could place it anywhere they want.
Absolutely. And you don't have to be a great embroiderer to do that. It's quite a basic.
No.
Yeah.
Because any shape would be okay for the giraffe.
That's true.
It's very forgiving.
So I want to just talk quickly about the yarns that you use. Are they DK or fingering weight, or what?
Most of my yarns will be what you might call Aran weight.
Okay.
In the U.S., we call it worsted weight,
Okay.
which is like a number 4 category. In the U.S., we grade them by numbers as well,
Yes.
but they would be called a worsted weight, and I think a 10-ply Aran
Okay.
would be it for you, because it needs to have some kind of body to it.
Yes.
Sometimes I use chunky yarns or bulky yarns, the heavier ones.
Yes.
It depends on what I'm trying to create.
Okay. And are there any particular types of yarns that you prefer to work with?
Well, since I have children mostly using my toys, I try to steer toward the yarns that are washable and non-allergic yarns. So therefore, it ends up being more of the acrylics and the synthetic blends. Cotton would be okay if I were to use it with blended in with some acrylic, because cotton tends to stretch out on its own.
Yes.
I need a yarn that will hold its shape and be easy to clean, because I'm hoping that these animals will get a lot of use and they
love.
need to be washed. And also, I find that the acrylics tend to be a little less expensive than some of your natural fibers, and I know there are so many grandparents who may be on fixed incomes that are knitting for their grandchildren, so it might fit better into their budgets, and they come in so many colors. So it works out well for me to use the acrylics.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's just talk quickly about the design process, because every designer has a slightly different way of going about it. So can you tell us, from the first original ideas that might pop into your mind to the beautiful cuddly toy that's ready to make friends with a child, what's the process for you?
Okay, well, I'm a very visual person, so if I can't visualize it in my head, I will not be able to design it. So I spend a lot of time working it all out in my head. I will think about what kinds of yarns I might use for this, what kind of a look am I trying to achieve. Am I going to start from the bottom up or the top down? Where will I place the shape? All kinds of things are worked out in my head until I get a direction. Once I get a direction, then I will sit with a pencil and paper and what I call a working yarn, which is a white yarn in the same weight category of the intended yarn that I will use later. And I will just start and write down everything that I'm doing. And of course, I have to rip out multiple times and cross things out, and it takes a while until I finally get the shape that I'm interested in. At that point, I could go to the computer and type my notes into a pattern format that is visually pleasing and also will be orderly and in a jargon that's understandable. Then I will use that pattern to actually sit with my intended yarn and knit the project. And as I do that, I try to look at the pattern as if I'm looking at it for the first time. So I can see if I have any typographical error that might have gotten in there, or if something just looks awkward or jumps out at me as not being clear enough. So then I can make adjustments to that.
Okay.
So it's the process. It's quite time consuming, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So are you working on something now that's new? Have you got an exciting project coming along?
Well, right now, recently I was contacted by an Australian knitter who asked me if I would consider designing an Australian animal. And so that's where my focus is right now.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out which one, will I do and how I will go. So it's in the thought stage at the moment.
Well, there's certainly many Australian animals to pick from. So you'll have to let me know when you've decided, and I might knit one up for my niece.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to just finish off now with perhaps your inspiration or your passion, as in designers really love to design for many different reasons. So what's the passion for you? What elements of the creative process do you really enjoy the most?
Well, for me, the passion is in the creation of the design. I really enjoy placing something on the earth that I'm proud of and that children will love and hold dear and that others will enjoy making for themselves. I really get excited. It's exciting for me to see where in the world my pattern ends up. And I've really had a wonderful, it's been a pleasure chatting online with knitters from other parts of the world. I find that this is a wonderful hobby for me to do in retirement because I could make my own schedule so I can go at my own rate and not put a lot of pressure upon myself. I find that it's a creative outlet that is, I find very gratifying. That's why I do it.
That's great. Many designers do actually comment that they love how their projects or designs come alive in other people's hands and see, you know, what other modifications somebody might make or colours they might use, and they see their baby, so to speak, just grow in
That's
different
right.
ways. So I could imagine,
That's right.
yeah.
And every time you make even if I make it again, it will look different than the first time. Every knitter puts their own stamp on it. Even if they make it more than once, it always comes out a little different. It's like a personality just seems to come alive when they're knitting.
Yes. And I have to say, your animals are absolutely gorgeous. They look
Oh, thank you so much.
so great in real life. Like, I've had a look at all the pictures of them, but just with having you hold them there, they're totally beautiful. So I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
And showing us that your gorgeous toys. I'm sure a lot of people are very inspired to knit them as for children, but also for themselves. So thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Andrea.